Well, thank you so much, Sujit, for inviting me. I'm not in Delhi. I'm in Amritsar, as you mentioned. I mean, suddenly this thing happened. Now, this particular, idea about having a separate, embassy for EU is a very interesting idea, which I think you are the first one who has kind of put forward in the Indian at least circles. So I'll come to this, the importance of this particular, issue. But one just if I just wrap up in 5 minutes or so, what is really happening in the last couple of years on the India-EU affairs, and how these kind of ideas and these kind of initiative might be very useful in the long run. Because if you look at for the last couple of years, there is definitely a new momentum in India-EU relationship. And historically, we all know that Europe has been important for India for trade and technology, for investment. And I think, there are all indicators that it will continue to be important for India. But now what has happened is this, the evolving Asian and global geopolitics, particularly in the last few years, this has also brought India and EU further closer. If you look at within the context of, say, assertive China, US-China tensions, and the British exit from the European Union, and also India's closer ties with the United States, and also India-China tensions. So in that context, broader context, what one has witnessed that, the India-EU partnership has really further strengthened. And if you look at, apart from large number of high-level visits, both from the EU and also at the member state level, now summits are more or less happening regularly. The trade negotiations have been started. There is also a connectivity partnership. Now we also have a Trade and Technology Council, which has also been established. And apart from within Europe, or at least within the EU, with the traditional strategic partnership with the European Union, with the France and Germany, now we also have another partnership with Italy. We also have a green strategic partnership with Denmark, and also water partnership with the Netherlands, and of course the India-Nordic summits, which are also taking place. So in the broadly, what you can see, there is a convergence now on large number of areas, particularly on trade and climate change, trusted technology, digital economy, health, migration, mobility, sustainable development goals, etc. And most of these issues you can see have been captured within Roadmap 2025. And since Indo-Pacific narrative is becoming very, very important, and many of the EU member states have come up with its own Indo-Pacific strategies, and the latest one now you also have from the Czech Republic. So that is also bringing India and Europe closer. But within this one, I think as a result of a war in Ukraine, the European nations are and EU itself are quite seriously occupied within Europe itself. So at one level, I think they are busy providing political, diplomatic, military, and humanitarian assistance to Ukraine. At another level, they're also busy responding to energy diversification, inflationary pressures, and also domestic economic support to many sectors. And on the India-EU front, in the context of Ukraine, I think many within the EU, they were quite disappointed because they thought that being a close strategic partner, India would more or less align with them. But as we all know that, India's perceptions about Ukraine war very differs from Europe. And to me, I think it's quite early to evaluate really the impact of this on India-EU ties in the long run. And of course, the large number of interests converge. And there is also strong institutional mechanism to support this partnership. So officially, I think both India and EU will continue to work on all those mechanisms. But I think it is also perhaps be naive to think that it will not have any impact on the mood and momentum on the India-EU partnership, particularly One, Russia has become EU's main security challenge. And Russia has also now become India's number one defense as well as also oil supplier. This is a bit of a dynamic situation. So apart from the India's dependence on Russian military equipment, now of course the oil dependence. I mean, this will obviously will have a very serious strategic consequences in the long run. Broader in the Eurasian geopolitics, and also it will have a serious impact on, I think, on the international north-south trade corridor, which India started long back, with the Russia and Iran. This didn't take off very long because the India-Russia trade was not taking off. But now Russia is also becoming an important trading partner of India. So it means now, apart from these issues, I think we also have this connectivity partnership. This could be a game changer between India and the EU. And already the principles have been identified, even the areas have been identified, particularly Africa, Central Asia, Indo-Pacific, where they really want to work together. And it could be linked up with the EU-Japan partnership and also with the India-Japan Asia-Africa growth corridor. Now, Indo-Pacific, as I said, it's becoming closer, but somehow the approach, European approach toward Indo-Pacific is slightly different. Now, I'm narrating all these things that a lot of things are happening which need to be monitored very, very carefully. And even if, say, for example, when we were saying that the negotiation, the trade agreements have restarted. Now, negotiations have restarted, but after this, as we know what has happened with the EU-China, investment agreement. So even if negotiations are concluded, but then it can get stuck at the European Parliament if you're not very careful about, because there is a clear-cut mandate to the European Parliament. There has to be a human rights chapter, there has to be labor issues as well as also sustainability issues with all the trade agreement which they are signing. So we have to really be very, very careful, monitoring carefully all the things which are happening and all the different kind of narrative in Europe about Indo-Pacific, and also the evolving situation on the EU-China relationship, because EU-China relationship, as you know, is very strong. They're deeply engaged with each other. But of course, there are also serious tensions which are emerging now. Now, to follow all these things, our policymakers, particularly those who are dealing directly with the EU, and our business people, those who are dealing directly with the EU. So they are quite aware of some of those issues, but there are also capacity issues, I believe. Within the Ministry of External Affairs in India, you have large number of countries in Europe and the EU. You have two desks already, Europe West and Europe Central. So apart from, say, for example, having a separate embassy, and I'm sure, this will be very useful. Not that they cannot handle in one embassy. Of course, they have been doing it for decades now, looking after EU, Belgium, and also Luxembourg. But my experience has also been, a couple of years back, I did a study for European Parliament. It was in 2015 when Prime Minister Modi had just come in India, and there was also new parliament in Europe. So they were really looking. That was the time when the momentum was really low, particularly India-EU relations. So they really wanted to kind of revisit and see where it can be pushed further. How can we revive India-EU relationship? So I did a study for European Parliament on India-EU relationship. I don't know exact word. Giving new energy to India-EU partnership. And when I presented this to European Parliament, a couple of MEPs, those who are looking India, including Nina Gill and many others, so they were there in the European Parliament, and there was also many people from other embassies and other places, as happened in all the meetings in the European Parliament. But unfortunately, there was nobody from Indian embassy when the whole India-EU strategic partnership study was being discussed in the European Parliament. So later on, I checked with our ambassador. I said, why there wasn't anybody? He said, we were not informed. So, maybe they were not informed, but, this is also the problem, because even if officially they were informed or not informed, I don't know how the system works. But if something seriously being discussed by 100 people in the European Parliament on India EU, they must be knowing that this is what is going to happen. So it means there is a certain, so it means they were not really following day to day what is happening in the various institutions of the EU. And I can understand because they might be busy with so many other issues as well. So if you have a separate, I mean, it's more than I would say separate, embassy for EU, which I mean that's a matter of details. You can have a separate embassy, but definitely you need a couple of experts within the EU embassy, within our embassy in Brussels, who specialize various aspects, the issues which we feel are very important. These are Indo-Pacific issues, or our trade-related issues, or the issues concerning sustainability, labor, human rights, or those are the issues which are going to be very crucial in our dealings with the European Union. And of course, now also the issue of Russia and the Ukraine war. So how situation is evolving within the European institutions, there has to be the person who understands the nitty-gritty. I'm sure our officers are very clever, so they learn on their job, but you really need people, those who have been, and it's not very easy to understand all the details of the European institutions and how do they function. It takes very long time. Even for Europeans, it takes long, but even for others. So if you have certain specialists, both at the MEA level, if you feel that this particular relationship is very important for us, which I'm sure it is. So we have to have more experts, at least, I mean, within the MEA, if you have at least, one joint secretary now dealing Central Europe and one West Europe, you might have one extra joint secretary here itself who is dealing specifically only European Union. And then similarly, many experts there at the EU embassy looking into our key interest where we are interested. And I think that will go a long way in resolving many of the issues, which sometimes suddenly either expectations are raised very high and then suddenly there's disappointment, things are not happening because the EU we should also know very clearly where the competencies are, how things are, because yes, some very key people, they know about those, but not everybody is fully aware on different aspects, competencies between the European Union institutions and also the member states. So I think the idea which you have floated is very useful, and I think it really needs to be debated very seriously within India and within the ministry. And I think maybe we can find some useful answer to this. Thank you.